Security are working closely with local authorities to assist with the investigation, and they will provide updates as to the investigation and how it develops. I want to thank the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and all of the first responders for their courageous efforts and for helping to save the lives of so many. The speed with which they acted is miraculous and prevented further loss of life. To have found the shooter so quickly after the first shots were fired is something for which we will always be thankful and grateful. It shows what true professionalism is all about. Hundreds of our fellow citizens are now mourning the sudden loss of a loved one, a parent, a child, a brother or sister. We cannot fathom their pain. We cannot imagine their loss. To the families of the victims, we are praying for you, and we are here for you. And we ask God to help see you through this very dark period. In times such as these, I know we are searching for some kind of meaning in the chaos, some kind of light in the darkness. The answers do not come easy. But we can take solace knowing that even the darkest space can be brightened by a single light, and even the most terrible despair can be illuminated by a single ray of hope.
President Trump's earlier comments from the White House. The brother of the suspected gunman spoke to reporters outside his home in Florida. Here's his reaction to what happened.
There's not even anything I can say. I mean, how do you... I mean, my brother did this. This is like it was done, like he shot us. I mean, if he'd have killed my kids, I couldn't be more dumbfounded. I mean, it doesn't...
So
there's nothing.
Last communication.
There's nothing.
After the hurricane.
I mean, I can show you the text. He said, how's mom? Did you get power? I mean, that was it. There's absolutely, we have nothing. Like I said, we have nothing for you.
Joining me now, CBS News law enforcement analyst Paul Violas. Paul, what will investigators be looking at right now in these first 24, 48 hours?
What's most critical, Stephanie, is that forensically they're going to start with the information that they've uncovered or continue to uncover as they executed the search warrants on both the residents and the vehicles. Primarily, they're going to start going to desktop, laptop, and telephones. They'll get his cell phone records to identify anyone that he spoke with, the length of those conversations, the longer, obviously, people are going to be interviewed, so they're going to have to go down that route.
People like his brother.
Could be his brother, but it could be a variety of people. We don't know who he'd spoken with, but they're going to get his cell phone records. They probably have them. That's where they're moving right now. Second thing is they're going to look at his computer. What websites did he visit? Who did he email? What type of traffic? What may have motivated him for this particular incident today? I mean, something did. We know that. And that's forensically where they're going to start.
There are two crime scenes, as you said. Right. There are the two hotel rooms he had rented in the Mandalay Bay Hotel since Thursday, where he was shooting from that 32nd floor.
Right.
And then there's the scene where 58 people were shot and killed.
Correct. So the first crime scene they have to work is going to be where the shooter was himself on the 32nd floor. They're going to uncover hundreds of shell casings. They're going to really be able to ascertain what weapons he used, take that information, give that to alcohol, tobacco, and firearms so that they can trace where those weapons came from, how he bought them, etc. And then the second crime scene they're going to work is, and this is going to take a while. This is going to take days, is going to be where the concert was itself because of the sheer death count, the amount of injuries, and the amount of evidence, physical evidence, that's going to be and continue to be collected at that site.
The suspect has been identified only as a white male, 64 years old, Stephen Paddock. Right. He had 10 guns in that hotel room. If you were investigating this, Paul, what would you be most interested in learning about this man?
I am most interested in his past. The one thing that I've learned 37 years of doing this is that nothing happens overnight and nothing happens spontaneously. Something happened in his life, whether it was a while ago, whether it was recently, but something served as a catalyst. His behavior is going to be the information that's going to create a mosaic for investigators so that we'll be able to dive deep into him to see what the impetus was for this type of incident. There's no question that I want to look at his work history. I want to see where he worked. I want to speak to
They said he was a gambler. Right? Does that raise any red flags?
No, it may or may not, but I don't, at this point, forensically, especially on the behavioral side, there wouldn't necessarily be a correlation to, even if he had gambling debt, to selecting that particular concert at that particular time. Remember, and it was a selection. He chose that concert, and it was a music festival that went on for days.
He didn't just choose that concert. He chose the moment in the concert when the headliner, Jason Aldean, was going up, and he had the rifle, so it appears to have been premeditated. Just how would you characterize that type of mass murder?
There's no question when you take a look at this that it was premeditated. The planning that went into this was incredible. Remember, when he checked into the hotel, Stephanie, he had to ask for a room overlooking that particular concert. He wanted a certain height. He wanted to be on a certain floor. And you have that balance of security and customer service, especially at a casino. So when someone comes in, let's say it's a big gambler, they cater to them. I'd love, last time I stayed here, I was on the 32nd floor, and I'd love to be able to get a room that's overlooking that concert so I can watch it for a while. So he set that up. He planned that. And carrying 10 long guns up to that room took time. It didn't happen in one shot. So, this is something that was clearly premeditated.
I heard one of the witnesses describe it as it felt like he had been shooting fish in a barrel, because you're talking about at a height. So I would imagine part of the profile is he wanted to kill as many people as possible at this event.
He was looking for a big stroke. He was looking for mass casualties. He wasn't looking to hurt one person or to send a message. His message was, and again, this is going to be fine-tuned, of course, but his message was that he wanted to make sure that he was listened to. He wanted to make a statement for one reason or another. Now, we also know it's pretty obvious that he didn't plan to live through this. He didn't plan to survive this event. This was his swan song. The question is why? Begs the question, what motivated him? What inspired him to take this type of action?
I have one more question. Officials say that the shooting had no connection to an international terrorist group. What are they looking at when they're determining that?
Well, again, we're going to go back to the forensic investigation with respect to his communications. Now, on one side of it, they're looking at, was he on any type of terror watch list? Whether was Homeland Security looking at him? Was ICE looking at him? Was anyone looking at him in that regard? The second part is, now they're going to see who he's communicated with. So on the surface, there does not appear to be a connection. However, and I will state this though, and as much as I agree with Ron, who was on before, and others, this doesn't look like the person that is typically recruited by ISIS. There's no question about that. However, we can't rule it out yet. Not until they really examine what's on his computer, because we don't know the websites he's been visiting or what's been inspiring.
What more do you think can be done, if anything, to prevent mass shootings like this?
Stephanie, that's the thing that we're going to scratch our heads over for some time. And you know why? Because we live in a society right now where we enjoy our freedom, we enjoy being able to move and go wherever we want to, as we should. That's one of the greatest parts about our country. But by the same token, we have to make a balance, right? So we go to a casino. Do you want, and this is a question for all our viewers, do you want now, whenever you go to a hotel, whenever you go to a casino, to have your bags x-rayed? Do you want to be wanded when you walked in? This is something that I personally don't think we're going to go in that direction, but I think there's going to be some lessons learned. I'm just not exactly sure right now what they're going to be.
Paul Violas, thank you so much. I want to take our viewers live to the White House right now for the White House press briefing.
Last night, thousands of our fellow citizens endured what the president has rightly called an act of pure evil in Las Vegas. The president has ordered our flags to half-staff, and to further honor those lost in the attack, we will hold a moment of silence on the South Lawn this afternoon at 2:45 Eastern Time. The president will visit Las Vegas on Wednesday to grieve with the friends and family of the victims, to offer his support to those recovering from their wounds, and to thank the courageous first responders. In the coming days, this attack will directly impact communities all over our country, whose residents were visiting the entertainment capital of the world to attend a concert. One man, 29-year-old Sonny Melton, had traveled from Tennessee to Las Vegas for the concert with his wife, Heather. When the bullets began raining down from above, Sonny shielded her from danger, selflessly giving up his life to save hers. They'd been married for just over a year. Others risked their own lives to save people that they had never met. Mike McGarry of Philadelphia laid on top of students at the concert to protect them from the gunfire. They're 20, I'm 53, he said, and I've lived a good life. Lindsay Padgett and her fiancé, Mike J., fled for cover during the attack and immediately returned to the scene with their pickup truck to help transport the wounded to nearby hospitals. Gail Davis, who was attending the concert with her husband, said she owes her life to a brave police officer who instinctively served as a human shield, protecting her from harm. Sadly, multiple police officers, both on duty and off duty, were among those killed or injured. But what these people did for each other says far more about who we are as Americans than the cowardly acts of a killer ever could. The Gospel of John reminds us that there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for a friend. The memory of those who displayed the ultimate expression of love in the midst of an unimaginable act of hate will never fade. Their examples will serve as an eternal reminder that the American spirit cannot and will not ever be broken. In the days ahead, we will grieve as a nation, we will honor the memory of those lost as a nation, and we will come together, united as one nation, under God and indivisible. And with that, I'll take your questions. Major.
Can you tell us a little bit about how the president first learned about it and your engagement with him, his own personal reaction to the events of today? He also said in the Oval he might spend more than a day in Las Vegas. Was he referring to a couple of days there?
We're still finalizing the details of the travel that'll take place. We know for sure that he'll be there on Wednesday, and beyond that, we'll keep you guys posted as those arrangements are finalized. In terms of activity this morning, the president was briefed early this morning by General Kelly and has been updated regularly and constantly throughout the day, and will continue to as new information is provided by law enforcement officials.
Have you had a chance to talk to him about his own, how he dealt with this?
I have seen him today, and I think he, like most of America, is saddened, and certainly his heart and compassion goes out to those that were affected. Jeff?
Sarah, many times when these horrible massacres occur, it leads to questions about gun control. Has this particular massacre made the president think anything more about pursuing tighter gun laws, such as background checks, to prevent massacres like this from happening again?
Look, this is an unspeakable tragedy. Today is a day for consoling the survivors and mourning those we lost. Our thoughts and prayers are certainly with all of those individuals. There's a time and place for a political debate, but now is the time to unite as a country. There's currently an open and ongoing law enforcement investigation. A motive is yet to be determined, and it would be premature for us to discuss policy when we don't fully know all the facts or what took place last night. Jeff?
Follow on that, Sarah, though, do you believe that, or does the president believe that this is a moment, that this is a time when there should not be a political discussion, it should be a policy discussion? Does he believe that he could bring something new to the gun debate that has been, locked in typical politics for so many years?
Yeah, I think today is more, again, like I said, a day of reflection, a day of mourning, a day of gratefulness for those that were saved. And I think that there will be certainly time for that policy discussion to take place, but that's not the place that we're in at this moment. But certainly I think that there's a time for that to happen.
I can follow. Before he was elected president in some 15 or 16 years ago, he did have a different view on guns than he had during the campaign. Does he believe that this is something that he could lead a bipartisan effort on at some point? And what would that be appropriate?
I think that's something that we can talk about in the coming days and see what that looks like moving forward. I think one of the things that we don't want to do is try to create laws that won't create or stop these types of things from happening. I think if you look to Chicago, where you had over 4,000 victims of gun-related crimes last year, they have the strictest gun laws in the country. That certainly hasn't helped there. So I think we have to, when that time comes for those conversations to take place, then I think we need to look at things that may actually have that real impact. Matthew.
Thanks, Sarah. On Puerto Rico, can you tell us a little bit about the president's aims for his visit tomorrow, and do you expect any tension given some of his comments over the weekend?
We have several stops that we'll put out later this afternoon in terms of the specifics of that trip. We are going to be spending significant time there in Puerto Rico, meeting both with first responders as well as the storm survivors, and we'll again put out the details of that exact schedule later today.
From some of his comments over the weekend, like the folks down there wanted everything done for them, do you expect that to come up in any of his conversations?
I expect the focus to be on the recovery efforts, which we're fully committed to. The top priority for the federal government is certainly to protect the lives and the safety of those in affected areas and provide life-sustaining services as we work together to rebuild their lives. That's going to be the focus, not just in the conversations tomorrow, but certainly the focus that we've had since this began. Celia.
All right, just pick up on that. Who exactly wants everything done for them? Who said they?
I haven't talked to him specifically about a defined of who they might be. Again, the federal government is doing everything within our powers and capabilities to first focus on the life-sustaining and life-saving measures, as well as on the rebuilding process. We've got over 12,000 federal staff on the ground. 64 hospitals out of 67 are partially or fully operational. 14 are now back on the electrical grid. 45% of customers in Puerto Rico have access to drinking water. 8 commercial airports are operational. 65% of gas stations are open. All of these things are things that we're continuing to push, continuing to move forward, and will be part of that effort.
And just back to today's tragedy really quickly, if I may. Does the president believe that what happened amounts to an act of domestic terrorism?
Again, we're still in a fact-finding mission. This is an ongoing investigation, and it would be premature to weigh in on something like that before we have any more facts, and we'll leave that to local law enforcement to work with also the federal law enforcement to make those determinations. John?
Over the weekend, this was when the president was very sharply critical of Carmen Cruz, who's the mayor of San Juan. Other than her comments on Friday morning, in which she criticized Elaine Duke for saying this was a good news story in terms of DHS getting supplies out to areas that they were needed, what was she doing that prompted such criticism from the president?
Look, right now our focus is to bring the mayor into the coordination efforts. This administration, as well as other members on the ground, have reached out to her. We hope that she will join with us in those efforts and be part of things. She's been invited to participate in the events tomorrow as well, and we hope that those conversations will happen and we can all work together to move forward.
Sarah.
Ashley.
Has Tom Price reimbursed the government yet for his seat on this flight? And if not, is there a specific deadline when you and the president expect to receive said?
I'm not sure on the time frame for that or whether or not it's already taken place, but we'll certainly keep you posted on that. Jordan.
Thank you, Sarah. Given what the president said about Secretary of State Tillerson's outreach to North Korea over the weekend, does the president still have confidence in him as Secretary of State?
He does, yes.
He's spoken to him since these tweets?
I believe so. I'll have to verify. John?
Thanks a lot, Sarah. It's a very sad day in this country, as you mentioned at the top, as the president said in his remarks. He said that when he goes out to Las Vegas, he's going to meet with first responders and, in addition to that, families of the victims that were impacted by this. What's the message to each of those groups when he goes out there?
Look, I think it's very simple to say that his goal is simply to be there to show the support of people from around the country and to stand united in not only this act of evil, but against all acts of evil. And I think that was clear in the president's remarks today, and something certainly that you'll see from his visit on Wednesday. Jessica?
Sarah, thank you. Following up on the tweets about the DPRK over the weekend, The president tweeted, "Save your energy, Rex. We'll do what has to be done." So is it the stated position of the White House that you're trying to get back to talks, or have you given up?
No, this is, we've been clear that now is not the time to talk. The only conversations that have taken place or that would be on bringing back Americans who have been detained, like that with Otto. Those were the type of conversations that this administration was willing to have. Beyond that, there will be no conversations with North Korea at this time. There are 3 Americans still detained in North Korea.
Lines of communication with Pyongyang, that's what you're primarily using it for. You're not using it to try to get
that would be the only reason for us to have conversations with them at this time. Howard.
Following that, I also asked about today, but does the president believe diplomacy then is not worth pursuing in North Korea?
There's a difference between talking and putting diplomatic pressure. We still strongly support putting diplomatic pressure on North Korea, which we're continuing to do, but now is not the time simply to have conversations with North Korea. We've encouraged all of our allies and partners to do more, and we're going to continue to keep all options on the table when it comes to that. Stephen?
Activities of today as well, you talked about how now is not the time to get into a gun control debate or to talk about policy. After the Orlando shooting, the president that day was out on Twitter talking about policy. He was talking about his travel ban. So when, for example, Senator Chris Murphy says it's time for Congress to get off its ass and do something, does the president
actually agree with him that Congress should get up and do something? I'm not sure that it's specific to that, but I think Congress has had several months of doing very little, and we'd like to see some actual legislation come through.
What would the president like to see Congress do is the question I want to get at.
Again, we haven't had the moment to have a deep dive on the policy part of that. We've been focused on the fact that we had a severe tragedy in our country, and this is a day of mourning, a time of bringing our country together, and that's been the focus of the administration this morning.
Orlando, though, Sarah, when at that day he was talking about the travel ban, saying he didn't want congratulations, essentially. Why is
there's a difference between being a candidate and being the president?
Thanks, Sarah. I do want to ask you, because before last night's massacre, the bill was advancing through the House. Republicans cleared it through the House Committee on Natural Resources that would, among other things, make it easier for people to buy silencers. Hillary Clinton tweeted about it this morning. She said that imagine the deaths in Las Vegas if the shooter had a silencer, which the NRA wants to make easier to get. Does the White House have a position on this particular piece of legislation?
Again, I haven't spoken with the president about that specific issue, but I don't think that is something that would have changed. Again, I think before we start trying to talk about the preventions of what took place last night, we need to know more facts. And right now, we're simply not at that point. It's very we need to remember the only person with blood on their hands is that of the shooter, and this isn't a time for us to go after individuals or organizations. I think that we can have those policy conversations, but today is not that day. Louise?
Sarah, are there any policy prescriptions that the president considers to be out of bounds on the policy debate that will happen in the next few weeks? Could you articulate a little bit what his position on gun control is?
The president's been clear that he's a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and I don't have anything further at this point. I'll take one more question. Fred?
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, a couple questions. One, ahead of the trip to Puerto Rico, Mark, just wanted to ask about there's a bill in the Congress, the McCain-Lee Act, which would give a permanent exemption to Puerto Rico from the Jones Act. Would the administration consider either a permanent repeal of the Jones Act or at least an exemption permanent for Puerto Rico?
I don't think that's something that's necessary at this time. If we deemed that it was, we could have that discussion then, but certainly something that we don't feel like is necessary today. So I wouldn't imagine that would be something needed.
Okay. Also, on the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, there's been some attacks among senators, some in the media, on her religious beliefs. Does the White House have some concerns about that?
We certainly support religious freedom and would ask that Congress also support that as well. As you all know, we've got a moment of silence taking place on the South Lawn here momentarily, and so with that, I'll close and just again, I think we ask collectively that everyone across the country keep the people both in Las Vegas and in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands in our prayers. Thanks.
That was White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders during a somber White House press briefing on a day where the U.S. is marking the deadliest mass shooting in its modern history. Huckabee Sanders said that the president will be going to Las Vegas on Wednesday, and while he is there, he will be meeting with first responders as well as victims. They are also going to be holding at 2:45 p.m. Eastern Time a moment of silence on the south lawn of the White House. So that is the live picture that you're seeing there, and also why Sanders cut the briefing a little shorter than usual. Several reporter questions around the gun control debate, which inevitably arises after each and every one of these mass shootings. Sanders said, quote, "This is not the time or the place to talk about guns," end quote. She emphasized that the White House is on a fact-finding mission and that they need more facts. She did reiterate the president's stance that he is a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. She also would not weigh in on why the president, in earlier comments in response to the Las Vegas shooting, did not call it domestic terrorism, when in the past he has been very quick to talk about terrorist attacks in other instances. Also, the president will be, as planned, visiting the devastated American territory of Puerto Rico tomorrow. And while he is there, he will also be meeting with local authorities, victims, first responders, U.S. military assets that are down there in Puerto Rico. It has been almost 2 weeks since Hurricane Maria devastated that island. It was a Category 4 hurricane, and the U.S. federal government has been criticized by some for what has been considered an inadequate and slower response than it reacted, for example, to Hurricane Irma or to Hurricane Harvey. This is actually an interesting time for the president to have to respond yet again to a mass shooting. Steve Scalise was just a congressman who was injured when he was shot back over the summer in a mass shooting that occurred during a congressional baseball practice. Was just released from the hospital several weeks ago, gave an interview to our Nora O'Donnell, and went back to Congress just a few days ago. And incidentally, it was also a year ago to this day that there was another mass shooting on an Oregon campus. By my count, President Obama, during his 8 years in office, had to give speeches following mass shootings more than 24 times, and President Trump, in his short presidency thus far, has had to react a second time to a mass shooting, this being, again, characterized as the largest mass shooting in U.S. history. In his earlier comments, the president called this an act of evil, but he also had very much a tone of unity, and he thanked first responders and police officers for their rapid response. He did not mention guns in that comment, and the White House was very careful to stay away from that during the press briefing. So again, what you're looking at right now is a live picture on the South Lawn where the president and First Lady will be marking with a moment of silence at 2:45 p.m. East Coast time the shooting victims. Here's the latest on what we know so far about what happened in Las Vegas at 10 p.m. local time last night. 58 people were shot and killed, and more than 500 people were injured. When a lone gunman opened fire, he was on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. There were 22,000 people below him at a country music concert, and they were watching the headlining act when he opened fire. He has been killed. He killed himself, according to authorities. I want to bring in Stephen Portnoy now. He is with CBS News Radio. He was at the White House briefing. Steve, thanks for being with us. Give us the main takeaways from this press conference.
Well, Sarah Huckabee Sanders began this press briefing today choking up